there are certain foods that feel really easy to overeat that you still want to enjoy from time to time, is to be very thoughtful in like deciding in advance that you're going to have them and how much. And ideally sitting down and focusing on the experience of eating them without distractions, so that you can prove to yourself you can control yourself around these foods, but you have to bring a different level of focus. And some people might say, yeah, but then that's not fun. Like, that's kind of tedious. I don't like, that's not really convenient. But the truth is that it's more enjoyable to bring all five senses to the practice of eating something, so that you can be more satisfied, both in the flavor, both in the enjoyment, and actually still feel good in your body. That's more satisfying than being in that frenzied energy of just like mindlessly putting in stuff into your mouth and not even tasting it, right? When we do that, we get to the bottom of the bag of chips and we think, I need something else, because like I feel like I didn't even eat anything, right? It's like, okay, where are the cookies? And then at the end of the night we feel terrible. We're like, ugh, like that was just too much. Why didn't I stop myself?
Welcome, beautiful souls, to Unleash Thyself, a podcast where we journey into the depths of personal transformation, spirituality, and growth. I am your host, Konstantin Morun, and today we welcome Molly Zemek. Molly is an author, a chef, and a life coach who helps people ditch dieting and embrace freedom around food. She helps people build their mind-body connection and learn how to create their ideal relationship with food and alcohol. She's also an author of the award-winning book, Decoding Your Emotional Appetite, and the host of Weight Loss for Food Lovers podcast. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too. Especially because I've had a love-hate relationship with food and weight loss most of my life, and for the last couple of years, I've been embarking on this healthier journey, and understanding how all the emotions I've accumulated over my lifetime have been impacting my choices
Mm-hmm.
and my weight. So I can't wait to dive into that with you. So I want to jump right into it. What have you found with your vast experience to be the number one reason why we struggle to have an amazing relationship with dieting or food in
Mm.
general?
The number one reason, that's that's really
Or number
that,
three, top three, whichever you think, because
yeah.
I know it's hard to pinpoint it, right?
Yeah, here's the thing. It's complicated, and it's also kind of counterintuitive to what most of us believe. The reason why many of us are either overweight or struggle with losing weight is not because of the food choices. It's actually because of overeating and overindulging. So it's about figuring out why we overindulge. And when I say that, what I mean is, eating beyond our ideal satiety point, eating when we're not
Mm,
hungry, mindlessly eating. Many of us have an ingrained kind of diet mentality that we've learned, either as kids or we've just, up through society. And so we believe that there are good and bad foods, and that there are certain things that we shouldn't eat if we want to lose weight. And so we restrict ourselves, thinking like, okay, I just need to restrict myself for a period of time. I need to cut back on calories. I need to eat clean, however you want to think about it. And while that method temporarily works, right, you can lose weight that way. You can, maybe feel better for a period of time. It ultimately leads back to overeating, because when we're restricting ourselves and we're believing that certain foods are off limits, we actually desire those foods even more. We end up rebelling against ourselves, and we end up, oftentimes like eating out of scarcity. It's so fascinating to me. This has happened to me, and it's happened to a lot of my clients where, inevitably, even though we try to be strict on a diet, we try to follow a weight loss plan, we'll have a moment of weakness. Life gets hard, or somebody brings a cake to the office, whatever the case may be, of having a piece of the cake that we think is forbidden. And then, we give ourselves a hard time, or we eat more because we think, well, what's the point now? I've already kind of blown it for today. So we'll actually eat even more than what feels good, because we're thinking tomorrow I have to be strict again. So there's things like this that happen where we tend to overeat because we're so focused on the food and we're not focused on our body. And so Dieting is actually not the answer, in my opinion. And this is coming from somebody who spent decades dieting, like going through that yo yo cycle of losing weight only to regain it, and overeating after a successful diet, regaining the weight, and then feeling frustrated and still believing the solution is, I need to go on another diet. And what I learned, which was how I discovered really this freedom around food, was that, you know, the successful approach was an approach that actually looked like me consistently eating in a way that helped nourish my body, where I felt a sense of expansiveness around eating and not a sense of restriction, and where I
Mm,
actually practiced listening to my body and paying more attention to my body than I paid attention to food. That's not something that I could easily do overnight because, just like, many of us are still believing in this like diet mentality that no, but I need to be counting macros, or I need to be eating this amount of protein, or I need to actually cut out bread, I need to cut out pasta. And so I had to really teach myself how to eat mindfully, how to include things that I wanted to include, but to do it in a very intentional way. So I was doing it in a way that honored my true hunger and my ideal satiety, and create a sense of safety around food, where I felt like I could have the things that I wanted if I was being very mindful and very attentive to my body. So I think that
yes.
people struggle because we don't fully understand, why we might be turning to food when we're not hungry. Our culture really promotes, food as entertainment, mindless eating, um, sort of socializing with an abundant amount of food, and so we just figure that that's normal. And food is the kind of thing, certain kinds of food, processed food, sugar, things like that, affect the brain in a way where we have a lot of desire for it once we start eating. There's kind of a chemical reaction that leads to just a huge dopamine response in the brain where we have a little bit and we want more. And if you're not really paying attention and you're not mindful about the foods that you're choosing to eat and how they affect your brain and how they affect your body, you can easily slip into kind of a mindless habit of just overindulging and then feeling like you have no control.
Yes. Oh my. I can resonate with so much of what you said there. And a few things stuck out to me, right? The idea of mindful eating. I would love to dive deeper into that. And I know you kind of touched on it towards the end there. But what do you see mindful eating really being? Like, if I'm someone that's eaten a certain way all my life, right? And I want to make changes, how do I bring awareness to that and be mindful of how I eat and bring mindful eating into my life?
Hmm. So I really encourage people to just meet themselves where they are. Because what feels so familiar to many of us is to just go on another diet and, like, okay,
Hmm.
let's be strict. Let's like cut out stuff and like clean out the pantry. That approach just perpetuates this yo-yo cycle. So what I say is, like, just meet yourself where you are right now and start to tune into your body. I reached a point in my 40s when I went through this transformation and was able to lose weight and change my relationship with food and alcohol, where I just recognized that my body was really suffering because of my habits. And there was no denying what my body was telling me, right? I had indigestion, I had insomnia, I had anxiety, I was irritable. And I just knew intuitively that it was because of my daily habit of drinking wine and because of like the multiple desserts I was eating. But I also didn't know how to change it because I was a food lover and, I was a chef and I spent so much of my free time pursuing this love of food. And the only approach I was aware of was dieting, and that just wasn't working for me anymore. And so I just started with listening to my body and recognizing that I just was not living my best life. And I really just came to this realization, you know what? I deserve to feel better. I really believe I deserve to feel better. And because I was committed to that, I was willing to start to approach my relationship with food and alcohol differently. So what I encourage people to do is just like feedback that your body is giving you now based on the choices you're making. And instead of, making yourself wrong or shaming yourself, just be willing to listen to sort of the truth of your lived experience when you eat this way. And if you don't feel like you're optimized either in like your mobility or your digestion or your energy or all of these things, or your emotional health, consider making some changes. And one of the things you can do, and this is a simple thing, but it's by no means an easy thing for many of us, is you can wait until you get hungry before you eat your next meal. And you can allow yourself to be hungry, and then you can practice stopping at your ideal satiety point. The only way you really know when your satiety is you allow yourself to be hungry first, and you see when the hunger ends and when the satiety begins. Ideally, you stop before you full, like that heavy fullness. You stop at a place where you feel light and you feel energized and you feel satisfied. It takes practice to do this because many of us are used to just eating because food's there, or eating because other people are eating, or eating because it looks good,
Mhm.
or like I'm watching TV, let's go eat something. So it takes practice to listen to your body, but the more you get to know your body and your signals, the more you can respond in a way that really allows you to feel your best. And the incredible thing about this, beyond the weight loss, because weight loss is great for a lot of reasons, right? If it allows you to feel lighter, if it gives you more mobility, if it improves your health. But the other thing is that you can experience a lot of pleasure in your body when you're feeding your body appropriately, when you're eating foods
Mhm.
that resonate well with your body. And that includes foods just for fun, but that if you're eating them in a way that you practice stopping it just enough so that you're not upsetting the pleasure that you feel in your body. So you're eating just enough to experience the full thing, delicious and indulgent, without sacrificing the pleasure in your body. And it's sort of this sweet spot that you have to determine. Um, that's kind of those are some of the beginning steps that I suggest to people.
Yeah, I mean that all sounds amazing, and I agree with a lot of it. And when you touched a bit on the emotional side of things, that as well, like you eat because others are eating, or you eat because the food is available, right? That ties a bit to the emotions and the thoughts and beliefs that one has. And in
Hmm.
my line of work, one of the things I've come to understand really well, based of course in neuroscience, is the idea that everything we do in life starts with essentially a thought or a belief, and then it
Hmm.
triggers an emotion or a feeling or both, and then things happen. And I look at myself and even my current self, but even in the past, like whenever I make a choice for a food, in this case, that perhaps is not in line with my goals, I
Yes.
can always track it back to an emotional feeling that triggered my choice,
Hmm.
and then track that back to a thought or a belief. Doesn't necessarily mean I can make a better choice in the moment, but by reflecting on it, I'm able to prepare myself for next time, so to speak. And you mentioned this is this idea that we give ourselves a hard time, because that example you gave at the beginning was so me, when it's like you have a cheat meal by choice and it just happened because someone brought you to the office, and then you beat yourself up, right? You make yourself small, and then that one day turns into multiple days,
Yep.
and then you're off the train, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to me, it all comes back to emotion, right? And then the name of your book is Decoding Your Emotional Appetite.
Hmm.
And tell me a bit more about this book, and to the audience here, like, let's say we pick it up and we want to read, what can we expect to find?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for asking. I titled the book "Decoding Your Emotional Appetite" because at its core is learning how to distinguish between your physical appetite and your emotional appetite. And when you identify that you're not physically hungry, that it's actually, emotions that you're experiencing that are motivating you to eat, you have this wonderful opportunity to figure out what are the deeper needs here. Because if I'm not physically hungry, if it's not my physical appetite, that means food is not the solution. If hunger's not the
Mm,
problem, food is not the solution. So, what is actually going on? What do I need to solve? Like, how can I take care of myself in new ways? So, what you can expect to find in the book is my personal story of transformation as a food lover, and how I learned to kind of dismantle a lot of these old beliefs, like you described, that had me mindlessly eating and drinking, and how I kind of created a new identity and a new body for myself in my 40s. And then a lot of the key concepts that I teach around mindful eating and mindful drinking as experienced through a lot of my clients. So you'll get my experience, the experience of my clients, and also a lot of information about what are some of the emotional reasons why many of us turn to food and alcohol. So you can better understand yourself and potentially see yourself in some of these examples.
beautiful. I love that. And you also touched a bit on the science aspect of it earlier, with certain foods triggering different hormones to be released, right? Certain foods releasing dopamine and making you want to eat more of that.
Hmm.
And what I've come to understand in my life is that once you go on the train of, oh, I'm gonna eat this to feel better, right? To some emotion that you may realize or may not realize is there.
Hmm.
The foods you have access to, either but because of the budget or because of they're easy to pick up, like chips and chocolate and things that I know I would pick up, or fast food,
Hmm.
they're designed in such a way to make you want to indulge in them because of those chemical releases.
Hmm.
So I'm curious to see, if you get to a spot where you make a bad choice, are there any strategies to stop yourself in the moment, or it's more of a come back to it later and review it, reflect on it, and not give yourself a hard time and understand why it happened? Because once you start, because of all the other things that were added, it's tough for you to pull yourself back.
Yes. I love the way that you're thinking, by the way, because you already know so much about awareness and mindset and the role of your thoughts, and so you're able to kind of connect the dots. Um, when every inevitably we will overeat, we will indulge in things. We're humans, and this is what I tell all of my clients. This is not about perfect eating. So you need to let
Mm.
go of this idea that you're going to be perfect, or that you need to be perfect to be in your ideal body. That just doesn't exist, and you set yourself up for failure when you try and set the bar so high. So yes, when the situations where you mindlessly eat, or you overindulge, or you keep eating beyond what feels good in your body, an amazing way to stay committed to yourself is by making sense of what happened. Just like you said, of okay, this is what I actually ate. This is kind of what was going on. Maybe you had a hard day. Maybe it was just the chips were there. Maybe you just thought, I don't really care. What was the thought, and what I describe as like a thought deviation that had you deviate from what you truly want? And not that you can't have the chips, but maybe your main goal is like you just want to feel good. And so maybe having a small bag of chips would have been perfect, not like the
Mhm.
family size. And so you kept eating them, and that was really just too much, and you didn't feel good. So why did you keep eating them? What was it that you were believing? And a common thought in this instance is like more is better, or this is my only chance. This is the only time I get to have these. Like that's another thought,
Yes,
right?
I
They
know
were
that
on
thought.
sale. They were on sale, and it's my favorite flavor. Whatever it is. It's really good to start like tracking those thought deviations, because we often believe the same things over and over again that lead back to overeating. And when you reflect on it, as you know, Constantine, that's when you develop awareness around the habit.
Yes,
And that's how you begin to unravel the habit, is after the fact. And so you're much more likely in the moment next time to recognize, oh, wait a second, there's my brain saying, like, this is your only chance to have these. And I know that's not true. I can get this whenever I want. But the other thing that's a great thing to practice is that if there are certain foods that feel really easy to overeat, that you still want to enjoy from time to time, is to be very thoughtful in like deciding in advance that you're going to have them and how much, and ideally sitting down and focusing on the experience of eating them without distractions, so that you can prove to yourself you can control yourself around these foods, but you have to bring a different level of focus. And some people might
I
say,
love
yeah,
that.
but then that's not fun. Like, that's kind of tedious. I don't like, that's not really convenient. But the truth is that it's more enjoyable to bring all five senses to the practice of eating something, so that you can be more satisfied, both in the flavor, both in the enjoyment, and actually still feel good in your body. That's more satisfying than being in that frenzied energy of just like mindlessly putting in stuff into your mouth and not even tasting it, right? When we do that, we get to the bottom of the bag of chips and we think, I need something else, because like I feel like I didn't even eat
Yes,
anything. Right? It's like, okay, where are the cookies? And then at the end of the night we feel terrible. We're like, ugh, like that was just too much. Why didn't I stop myself?
I love that.
Hey, it's Konstantin here, and I want to take a brief moment to truly thank you for being a part of this incredible journey of transformation. You are the reason we are creating this content. I see you and I appreciate you. Your support truly means the world to me. I want to ask you for a small favor. I'd love for you to join our mission by hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a thoughtful comment or review. Your engagement helps others discover these insights, and together we can continue to unlock the power of authenticity and personal transformation. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Now, back to the episode.
And when you ask the question, why didn't I stop myself? That's an easy slope down the path of blaming yourself, beating yourself up. So then it perpetuates the issue, right? Because then maybe in that moment you go reach for something else, and I'm talking from experience here, or it happens the next day.
Yeah.
And what I want to take us next, because you touched on this a few times now, and it's so amazing to see, because I'm with you on this a lot, the scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
Now, I'm someone that grew up in Eastern Europe during some of the toughest times for the country I grew up in, Romania.
Mm-hmm.
And I was young, but there was a lot of scarcity around. And that mindset, that mentality stuck with me for a long time. I'm still unraveling
Mm-hmm.
pieces and bits of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were talking about it yourself, I couldn't help but see the mirrors in every other area of life, right? Because the scarcity mindset doesn't just show up with food. Shows up with many other pleasures, right? It could be alcohol, and we can talk about it in a minute as well, because you've been able to knock
Mm-hmm.
that down as well. But it could be other pleasures, sex, movies, you name it, right? Money is a big one where scarcity mindset comes in a lot, abundance of any sorts. So I'm curious to see, from your experience with yourself, but also with your clients, once you address a scarcity mindset within food, how does it ripple across the rest of your life?
With the scarcity mindset, I talk about this in my book as one of the emotional appetites related to security. Using food as a way to feel secure, sort of
Mm,
eating in abundance is a way to create a sense of safety within yourself. And this often, as you said, kind of appears in other areas of life where we,
yes.
rely on things outside of ourselves for comfort and for safety and for security. And this is something that a lot of us learn as kids. It's sort of something that we see our parents do, or it's a certain sort of practice that we adopt. And it's okay. It's just actually an opportunity now to sort of notice that that's your tendency, and to recognize, that the only thing that can create a sense of comfort and safety, like true comfort and safety, is by you learning how to support yourself emotionally. And that's the beautiful thing about identifying this, and noticing, let's say if we just use the example of food and alcohol, that, what, I'm not hungry, and I'm eating all of this food because I'm afraid that we'll waste it if I don't eat it now, or I feel like I need to stock up because this might be my only opportunity. I'm not physically hungry, and I'm turning to food for a sense of security and safety. Now, if I don't do that, if I'm really conscious about just honoring my body and stopping at enough, and noticing that there's still food on the plate and there's still food left behind, I have to acknowledge the emotions that are there, and I can become familiar with that feeling of maybe insecurity and discomfort, and begin to think about, like, how can I help myself feel safe and secure without eating? Like, how can I support myself through this and remind myself, what, I feel nourished, I feel satisfied, and my body will benefit from me stopping at this amount. And that I can save the food. I can, actually learn to maybe buy less for myself if I'm not eating this amount. But eating more isn't going to help me feel any safer. It's not going to help me feel more secure. It's just going to reinforce this habit that when I'm feeling that way, I need to eat as a way to comfort myself. So it's kind of acknowledging the pattern, and then, accepting that you feel that way in the moment, and then talking yourself through it, supporting yourself through it, and teaching yourself that you can feel safe and comforted without turning to food and without turning to alcohol.
And I love what you said there as well. I mean, a lot of things, but one that stuck out to me is that the importance of understanding the root cause. In this case, would be the feeling of safety and security.
Hmm.
Or it could be that you have a fear of scarcity. And you're like, well, I need to have it now because I don't know if I'll have it tomorrow.
Hmm.
And a lot of us, from what I've seen, and I say a lot of us because I've been one of those people for a long time in my life, don't actually stop and ask questions enough to get to the why, and don't have the people in our life to help us get to those answers.
Hmm.
And that's why the stuff you do and I do, and it's so important. And I see it in my life now that I have my own coaches and mentors.
Yeah.
You need to surround yourself with people that will ask the tough questions when you are not ready to ask them yourself.
Hmm.
And then, of course, in the process, you learn to ask your own tough questions. And then sometimes you'll have a harder day and you won't be able to answer them. And that's okay. Give
Yeah.
yourself grace and move on.
Yeah.
And when it comes to what you just said right now, in terms of the food being on my plate, and then I eat half of it and I feel full, but then I see half of it on the plate, and then I force myself to eat the rest of it. That was an example that was close to home because I've always been one to finish what's on my plate, right? So, of course, in North America, I'm in Canada, you're in the US, the food portions are massive. I was recently in Europe where I was born, and I realized what a huge difference there is in just how much you are given. And what it opened up for me was to start to reflect back and say, well, why am I so keen on overeating
Mm-hmm.
just to finish what's on my plate? And it
Mm-hmm.
was the scarcity mindset to some degree. But then what I realized, and I did this through the use of hypnotherapy and other reflective practices like meditation and journaling, it turned out, for me at least, there were some stories in my life from when I grew up in,
Mm-hmm.
of course, Scarce, Romania, where I remember stories of being told I gotta finish everything that's on my plate because it cannot be wasted,
Yeah.
right? And then being reprimanded. This would be in school or with my caretakers where I grew up. And then once I realized it, I'm like, wow. So I took on the stories of someone else. I made them my own.
Yeah.
And that's why they keep showing up in my life. But
Yeah.
had I not done that work to unpack that, to go to the root cause, I would have never been the wiser.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why there's
Absolutely.
so much power in what you said there, because for those listening, if you haven't had a chance yet to reflect back, that's probably in my book, the most important step in anything in life, not just weight or booze or anything else like that.
Right. I mean, it's a question of identity. And what you've just spoken about is really, re-examining the story that you used to tell. And this is a
Yes.
story that you adopted from what other people told you. And that is, often the case where we internalize messages that other people, caregivers, people in authority positions tell us, and we never have the opportunity to really question whether it's still true. And so this is actually a big part of what I work with people on in my membership program, because in order to be in your ideal body, to have the relationship you want with food and alcohol, you have to be in the state of mind ahead of time. We don't wait until you arrive at your goal weight or till you get to the point where you could happily just have one glass of wine a week. You actually have to create the state of mind as you're going through the process. And you do that by first writing down your old stories and coming to terms with all of those things that you used to believe that led you to mindlessly eat and drink. And beginning then to sort of be curious about them and redefine what's true for you now. And you have to be able to look at those old stories and release them before you can embody this new version of yourself. Because
Yes.
as you said earlier, those old thought patterns will continue to influence you. Your brain will refer to the past and this past identity to inform the actions that you take today if you're not intentionally trying to change it. If you're not intentionally doing the work of pulling those thoughts up, looking at them, and then rewriting them based on what's true for you now. And here's the interesting thing, Constantine, is that many of us, had a certain relationship with food and alcohol in the past that maybe served us back then. Right? As kids, we ate a certain way. And maybe when you were a kid, it served you to eat, everything that was on your plate because you were doing what your parents told you to do. There's nothing wrong with that. Like that, you did what you thought was best. Your job was maybe to listen to your parents, but that doesn't serve you anymore now. And that's okay. You can let go of some of those old ways of relating to food and alcohol, and you can move on and let them go. And then redecide now, okay, what really serves me in this current body? I know for me, being in my late 40s, I can't eat the way my kids do. And I've tried to. I'm like, oh, like let's have some of the chips. Like let's have my body just doesn't respond the way. And I had that the way that it used to. And I had to come to terms with that. You can't eat like a kid anymore. You just don't feel good. You can't live the life you want to and be able to eat as much as they do, the same kinds of foods. You can have some of those things every now and then, but you have to be thoughtful about it so that you continue to feel good, sleep well, be able to, be energized to do the other things that you want.
I love that so much, that example with your children as well. And as you thought that, I can't help but smile at the notion that I talk about a lot on the podcast, and it seems like you do as well, in the sense of this holistic approach to weight management, or dieting, if you may, or like weight loss, where it's essentially not just about the physical aspect. Because if you look at most diets out there, and I've tried a lot of them, they
Hmm.
only address the physical aspect. track the
Yeah.
macros, track the calories, put in less than you consume,
Right.
exercise, do all these things, which is great, right? Because that's obviously a prerequisite to you getting to the next level. But if you
Hmm.
don't deal with the emotional side of things, with the mental side of things, even spiritual side of things, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And I've seen it, I mean, firsthand over and over in my life and in the life of some of my clients that I work with, as well as loved ones all the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Because when an emotion gets a hold of you, you it's tough to get out of it because an emotion is followed by an action.
Hmm.
And in my case, when I was depressed and suicidal years ago, right, no matter how much I wanted to feel better, I just couldn't, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
desire was there, but I couldn't do anything about it. That's why coming back, all the thoughts and beliefs, because that's the one
Mhm.
place you have 100% control over if you become self-aware first, like you mentioned as well. So powerful.
Yeah, yeah, I love that you mentioned that. And many of us, are so bought into this idea that it's just a matter of finding the next best diet, that we just continue to think that, okay, I just have to get strict again. I just have to find the next best diet, or I have to like take the newest weight loss. That's the solution. We're desperate for a quick fix, and I get it, because you can feel powerless around food if you don't fully understand, the role of habits, the role of your mindset, the nature of some of these foods that you're eating. It can feel like you don't have enough control. But I think you get to a point where you start to realize there's something missing. And it sounds like you reached that point where you realized, you know what, it's not just the physical aspect, it's not just the diet. I have to like really think about, what's motivating me to eat. And that's actually why I wrote my book, is to describe, how do you get to these underlying root reasons behind the overeating, behind the overdrinking, so that you can
Yeah,
actually solve the problem. And when we're turning to the next diet, or we're turning to the next weight loss drug, we're not looking inward, and we're not doing any of the mental and the emotional work to just really undo the habits.
absolutely. And I love that you touched on that because, funny enough, I mean, my journey with my transformational journey started, I was about 3 years ago when I was about 39, 38, 39. But it didn't start with a diet first, right? Because there were so many things to unpack, especially on the emotional side.
Hmm.
And for example, I mean, I've always had an amazing career because I put in the hard work. I followed what the gurus kept saying, is that you gotta put in the work, you gotta work the 60 hours,
Hmm.
sacrifice, because whenever you go to the destination, you're gonna be able to enjoy those things. And then you get there and then the next destination shows up and you're like, well, I gotta wait more. So for
Hmm.
me, it was not just sacrificing my diet in a way or how I would eat. I was sacrificing sleep, I was sacrificing relationships with self
Hmm.
and others. So it's about unpacking all of this, right? And
Yeah.
it started easy, like I can fix my sleep. Instead of sleeping 5 hours a night, I can sleep 7 to 8. Right? Put devices away. That was easy. When it came to diet, it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, why? I always ask the question why. Like, why am I doing this? Right? And then it
Hmm.
was like layer upon layer of unpacking emotions and stored emotions and feelings and traumas and whatever else that you have backed up there that you won't even realize will sabotage you, right? Because they say up to like what 95% of your thoughts and beliefs and emotions and feelings and actions are triggered automatically at the subconscious level. So by the time you realize you might be halfway down the bag of chips, the family size, and you're like, "Ooh, what's going on?" And then you get stuck there.
Yeah.
And
But
what?
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, yeah,
I was just going to say, but um, just so people don't get too discouraged thinking that, well, this is all unconscious, I'm not going to be able to like ever pull these up. What I just want to offer is that there's usually a handful of patterns related to overeating and overdrinking with
yes,
most people. And it really just takes spending some time planning and reflecting to really, not because you're trying to track, or not because you're counting calories, understand. I talk to people about this being sort of like, acting out, what are the things that I'm believing that are really leading me down this path of eating all of the chips? Because what I noticed in my journey of doing this is like there are about 5 thoughts that I always tend to believe. And I'm able to kind of pull them out, and pull the threads out, and become more and more aware of them. And so I think that you can sort of narrow down what the common habits are. When are the particular times of day? When are the common instances when this happens? It's not usually all day. It's particular situations and it's particular thoughts. So you can bring a level of focus to it, and over time, become a lot more aware of what's happening below the surface. So while so much of it is unconscious, and I don't think that we'll ever, like I said, completely get rid of mindless eating, that will happen sometimes. I do think there's a lot we can learn about ourselves and a lot that we can change just by being intentional.
Absolutely, and I love that we went there, right? Like, and the point you made. I mean, we talked about this a lot in this conversation. It's awareness is the key factor here, becoming aware, which then brings awareness to all those subconscious actions that we take or thoughts or beliefs that trigger everything. And you do have the power to get there. And that's why when I talk about the 95 up to 95% of everything that we do is subconscious, that's an autopilot, right? Ideally, we come out of autopilot to help live a better life. And better is by our definition or someone else's definition. So I love that you went there as well, because again, like for me, I always say this: awareness is half the battle. If you're not aware of something, you can't change.
Yes,
And
very
that's
true.
okay, right? If you want to change, that's okay as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we covered a lot of super important topics here, Molly. So I want to thank you for your candid answers and approach to this. I love everything you talk about, and I'm a geek when it comes to holistic health, right? Like looking at it from all angles.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the idea that we want a quick fix, and I was no different, right? I would jump from diet to diet, and the ones that were very extreme with fasting, 6-7 days a week type thing, or
Mm-hmm.
cutting out calories to under 1,000 calories a day, and I've done that, which led to some health issues, a decade or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what I came to realize myself is that we didn't get overweight overnight. Like for me, it took a long time,
Mm-hmm.
which means that if you want to get to your destination as well, it won't happen overnight either.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get to your spot, like you were talking about, where you have a much healthier relationship to what you're doing, so it doesn't feel like you have to diet for 2 years and then look for any opportunity to deviate so you can feel better? And how do you bring that emotion together? And I feel like you've covered that so well today. I want to thank you for that. And for those listening right now, you have the book Decoding Your Emotional Appetite, so go check it out. I'm assuming that's on Amazon and other places. And you also have your podcast, right? The Weight Loss for Food Lovers. And
Right.
tell us a bit about the podcast before we wrap up today, and what people can find on your show.
Well, I talk about my journey. I talk about a lot of concepts related to mindful eating, mindful drinking. I talk about unlearning diet rules and relearning the language of your body. I interview a lot of my clients who tell their own stories of transformation. And so there's a ton of resources there. I think that if people are looking for a new approach to feeling and looking their best at any age and any season, if they're tired of dieting and they've discovered that dieting just doesn't work long term, and they want to really kind of understand why those habits are there and how to change the habits, this is a great free resource. And then I would just also point people to my website, mollyzemek.com. I have some free trainings on my site. I have more information about myself. There's a free meditation that people can listen to related to how to deal with urges in the moment, around food. So yeah, there's just a wealth of resources if people just want to get some more help or learn a little bit more about how this approach is different.
Wow, love all of it, Molly. I want to thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
Thank
I'm
you so
excited
much,
to check some
Constantine. It
of
was
this
a
stuff as
pleasure
well.
being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of personal transformation. Your presence and engagement are at the heart of what we do, and I sincerely appreciate you, your time, and thirst for knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment. Please consider showing your support by hitting like, subscribe, leaving a comment, or writing a review. Your engagement not only fuels our mission, but also helps others discover these insights. For more daily guidance on personal transformation across the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical realms, be sure to visit our website at unleashthyself.com. You can also find us on Instagram at unleashthyselftoday, TikTok and YouTube at unleashthyself, and there we post daily content designed to inspire and empower you on your journey. If you have any specific thoughts, questions, or feedback, I truly value your input. I would love to hear from you. Together, we're building a community united in authenticity and purpose. Once again, thank you for being a part of this movement. Until next time, continue to embrace your true self and live a life on purpose, with purpose. See you in the next episode.